Hi guys, this is a short review for Blackmagic Design's Pocket Cinema camera, seen here with a 35mm micro lens. Basically, I've taken this out a couple of times now, and I don't really have it for very long, so I can't properly test it out. However, the image quality, first and foremost, is pretty decent. The camera is capable of 1080p at frame rates of 23.98, 24, 25, 29.97 and 30, and has 13 stops of dynamic range. The 13 stops of dynamic range isn't really necessary if you're a filmmaker and you've got a lot of experience, because you'll be able to still make the best out of your shots, but it can be handy to have that much dynamic range to work with, especially when shooting in the formats which the camera allows. The camera features an active Micro Four Thirds mount, which not all Micro Four Thirds cameras do have. I believe the actual cinema camera for this from Blackmagic doesn't have an active mount, but it enables you to use all of the electric lenses, like these Lumix series lens, like this Olympus series lens. Basically, it gives you the power to control the iris and the focus with these lenses, which can't be controlled unless, of course, you do have an active mount, which is really quite handy. Whilst this camera does boast that it will accept pretty much any lens attached to it with the correct adapter, there are some adapters which just don't work. For example, I've got a really old retro lens, a 52mm one here, which doesn't actually work on this one, and it's no problem with the Micro Four Thirds adapter. It's just that the camera doesn't like it, so it doesn't want to turn on when I attach it, which is a real pain, and it's a shame. The camera records to SDHC cards and SDXC cards, like this one here, and it records at a maximum of 27.5 megabits per second, which is quite low, but it's not bad quality. You're getting extremely good quality visuals out of this camera, so I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a bad thing, even though the one which I use normally is a 50 megabits per second card. 27.5 is really quite decent, and you are getting a very good quality image. One thing I really like is actually the grip. The grip is fantastic for this camera. It's sort of rubbery, and it fits nicely into the hand, and it's not going to get knocked as long as you hold on to it pretty tightly. Now, when it comes to like other cameras like the GMC G5, it's more sculpted towards the hand, which this one isn't. It's not sculpted in any specific way, but it allows you to get a very good hold on the camera. Is another contrasting grip. This one, it just sticks out a little bit too much for me, but this grip is very nice. This is the EM1 by Olympus, one of my favourite cameras. Anyway, when it comes down to it, the viewfinder I find is a real problem. It's really hard to see in bright sunlight what is going on the electric viewfinder here. I really wish that they'd got one like this on the back of the camera that just allowed me to look through and take the pictures or shoot. Hi guys, basically this is just a quick skin tone test. Not entirely sure how in focus I am, but I don't really know what the skin tones look like out in natural light, so that's what I'm testing first on this thing. I'm going to test it under some unnatural lights, I think, but this is basically what I look like in standard sunlight in the middle of a forest, in the middle of the world. So enjoy, and we'll have a little look at it after colour correcting now. Here's another test, and this is what it looks like when it's colour corrected. I'm not really sure what to think. One thing which is really good about this camera is the fact that it's got zebras. Basically, if you shine a light which is far too bright into it, it shows you the areas which are overexposed, which is absolutely invaluable when you're shooting outdoors with this thing. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. It also has focus peaking, but I wouldn't recommend focus peaking because it just doesn't work very well on this camera. At least that's what I find. I wouldn't recommend using the focus peaking, but the zebras is really good, and you won't necessarily get that in every camera that's in this price range. So I think that that's a really good quality thing to have. The iris and focus buttons at the back of the camera are pretty self-explanatory, and the iris button is exceptionally useful if you're working with any of these electronic lenses. I actually prefer using a lens which is fully manual on a camera like this to determine the aperture of the lens, purely because I don't like the way that the iris works. It's very, very hard to get the shot that you want and the look that you want, because it has a strange way of deciding what is right for the camera, and that's not always right for me as a filmmaker. However, it's still useful if you need to get a shot really quick. You can set it and it will activate very, very quickly. It's got a very, very quick reaction time, and it does give you a relatively decent picture most of the time. I've only had it sod up on me a couple of times, so I think that's really good. This is what you'll be getting when you're looking at the screen of the camera, so we'll have a little look. You've got your iris here, so we'll just hit that one and increase the light on me, which is, as you see, it reacts very, very quickly, which is really nice. You've also got your focus button here, which will focus on okay, I've got my lens set to manual, which will focus on a specific spot on the screen, which is good, and that will insta focus when I need it to, which is really nice. And the focus is very, very quick on this camera, which is really nice, and it's decent quality focus. Although I always would advocate using manual over this, but it's kind of hard using manual on this camera because it's so lightweight, especially when you haven't got a heavy lens attached to it. Anyway, when it comes down to it, you've got your sound here, so you can hear the quality of, or rather the level which is being recorded. You've got your histogram, you've got a bit of information, no card, that sort of thing on the screen. It's kind of useful, but it gives you a basic idea of what you're getting when you're starting to use this. Down at the side of the camera, you've got your remote control jack, you've got your headphones, your microphone, a HDMI, and you've got a 12-volt power input, which I would say is invaluable if you're going to be filming indoors, because we're getting on to the worst part of this camera, and the part which I absolutely hate more than anything in the whole wide world: power. Power is the problem when it comes to this camera, and it is the main bugbear. Now, I have quite a few batteries, and I expended 3 of them recently when going out shooting. Now, I shouldn't have had to expend that much. It says that you get about an hour's worth of filming with 1 battery for this camera. That's not true at all. You get about, I would say, 20 minutes of filming, if that, from 1 battery. That's really quite bad. There are some batteries as well which are meant to be a little bit better for the camera, like this Nikon one is apparently supposed to be better, I think, but they still don't last that long. And I've burned through a lot of the batteries. From what I've got from the image is pretty decent. I do like the image. And I would say that if I'd started with this one rather than the G5, I would be very happy with this one for a very long time. But I don't think it's worth the money that it costs to get one new, you know? It really doesn't seem to be worth it. I mean, the design is very, very simplistic, and that's great for a first-time filmmaker. But when you're really looking at it, sometimes it's good to have a lot more complication when it comes to design. This one is fantastic when it comes to certain things, like if you want to sneak it into a meeting. It's really small and it's really handy, but you could use a mobile phone for that kind of thing nowadays. The battery charger is actually not too bad, and it charges them quite quickly. It takes between 1 hour 15 to 1 hour and 30 to charge one of these batteries up, depending on the life of the battery. Now, it also charges up Nikon ones as well, which is really quite handy, and I think that that's pretty sweet. It works a lot better as well if you actually have it plugged in at the time. That's a very important one. But one of my main problems is actually with the batteries and with the battery readout on the camera. The battery readout on the camera is absolutely unreliable. You can't rely on it. At some points it'll say you've got like 96-97% battery. You turn it off for a moment, you turn it back on, it's at 40 or 20%. Either that or the camera randomly turns off. And this can't be a problem with all of the batteries that I've got. Basically, it can be really, really irritating to use, especially when it's like you start filming and you're like, okay, I've got 30% battery, I'll film for a bit, and you're filming for like maybe 30-40 seconds, and then the camera just crashes. You never saw that one coming. It just goes bomb and it's dead. And it's like the batteries run out. The meters on this are absolutely appalling at reading their own Blackmagic can't read its own battery. It can't read Nikon's batteries. They give you inaccurate readings and you can't trust them. So you need to really keep everything charged up and just be prepared for it to clunk out on you. I think that's a great shame because there are a lot of good things about this camera, but I feel that the batteries do let it down. I mean, I hate Panasonic, you know, I absolutely hate Panasonic, having worked with them for like 12 years. But one thing I will say about Panasonic's crappy cameras is that they do have a very accurate battery, and I don't get that with the Blackmagic one, which is a great shame. You have to hold the camera like this in broad daylight, just to sort of see what you're doing, and that's a really bad thing. Although I suppose you could get like a hood and cover yourself up and get a really good view on the screen. It's just impractical when it comes to that sort of thing. I do like the grip. The grip is actually really good, and I'm really pleased with it. You know, the camera does feel good in your hand, and it's very, very simple. That's a good thing about the camera. It's simple. You know, it's not overly complicated like a big camera. I mean, my OMD EM1 is a highly complicated camera. There's a lot of technology that's gone in here. But this one's not. It's very simple, and it does deliver decent quality for it, and it can be used to shoot films. You know, this DMCG5 still got pretty decent quality. You know, the filming quality on this is not that good, but I'd say that this is mainly a picture camera. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's just like I don't really know what I would do with this one. All I can really see it as being used as is, say I wanted a camera which is wedged in a really, really hard spot. Like if I want to attach it to the ceiling and just catch someone as it was going into the room, you know, that would be an interesting thing. Or to do CCTV angles, this would be a really good camera because you're getting a really decent quality shot. I mean, there are good things about this camera. I can't completely just say it's an abomination, but it's not one which I would really use much. It's when I was taking it out and using it, it was frustrating to deal with. I was getting annoyed. Now, there are some really good images from it, and I will grant that there are people who can use this camera really, really well. But it's one that you're going to need to really spend a lot of time getting to grips with. Even though it's just pretty much a point and shoot, it's very, very persnickety when it comes to things. It fights you. And I don't think that that's very, very good when you've only got limited time. Because by the time you've got a shot set up, especially outdoors with this one, you've burned half of your battery. And then you've got to readjust everything. And the automatic iris can be a real pain in the ass for that. Because you got to shoot like, you got to iris to try and find the right spot. And then the image doesn't look great. But, with all that said, I don't think it's a bad camera. If you're starting off with this camera, I don't really know what lens I would suggest for you. I like the 25mm f1.4 by Leica, which is a 50mm equivalent. That gives you decent control, and you can like move your focus ring very, very easily whilst holding onto the camera. Now this lens is quite expensive, and but if you like micro four thirds cameras, that's not a problem because you can use it on everything. Now, you know, it's a decent lens, and that's a very, very good lens to start off with. The other one which I would recommend, which is an absolute godsend, is the wide angle by Olympus, the 12mm f2.0. This is without doubt the best lens that I have ever got my hands on. In terms of owning, I have rented lenses that are better, but a 24mm wide on your Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, you can capture a whole room with this lens. So that is really quite good. Now the camera is lightweight. It's not the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't recommend it for a starting camera though. Absolutely not. Still, Um, in I guess my final words to say were that I was really expecting more from Blackmagic, especially with all the good things that I've heard. Now, I have seen good films, as I've said before. I've seen good films which have been shot on this camera. I know it can be used to shoot good films, and under really, really good lighting and having a really good lighting guy, that's the best thing in the world. But that applies to every camera. You know, that's not just this one. Now, I think that on some levels the simplicity of the camera is a problem, although it's very, very good if you just want to quickly take it out, iris, and shoot. You can do that, and you will get good quality. The focus is very, very decent. You will need ND filters with you, but even though the camera is lightweight, the weight which you carry around will be taken up with having a couple of lenses to fulfill the camera's needs. Another reason I like the X70 as a camera, because the lens is inbuilt. I've got a nice protective filter covering you. Very good camera. But yeah, anyway, I don't know what to say about the Blackmagic really. I think that it is not the worst camera I've ever put my hands on, but I can't see myself ever really using it, which I think is bad because I get obsessed over like thinking, oh wow, I can shoot this on the 20 quid Polaroid and Vivitar cameras. But this one's just so clunky when it comes to things. It's temperamental when you put your SD cards in, the sound is inaccurate at times, and I think that that's a really, really bad point. That said, I can't argue that the pictures that you can get out of this are pretty decent, and I do like them, but I would not use this to shoot a feature film. I could use it to shoot a short. I might use it one day to shoot a short, I don't know. But apart from that, I'm very confused really at the end of the day. I was expecting a little bit more from this camera. Anyway, I'm sorry that the review has been so late coming and that it has been slightly depressing, but you know, that's just the way it rolls sometimes. Anyway, in terms of Blackmagic design, this is a pretty decent piece of kit. It is decent. It will give you a decent picture, but I would say you definitely need your separate sound recorder. And I would recommend, if you want a sound recorder that will work really well, I'd recommend the LS100 by Olympus, which you can just hook up to a Rode mic and just drop that over the seam. You can just gaffer tape it to wherever you are. I'm going to be doing that down at the rail station in a couple of months' time, which will be good. Just gaffer taping the LS mic above people because it's easier to shoot that way. But anyway, I'm sorry that the review was slightly disappointing, and I'm sorry I can't give this camera a massive thumbs up. All I can do is give it a thumb to the side because I'm not really sure about it, and I know that it's capable of creating good stuff. Anyway, you guys have a really nice day. If you've got a Blackmagic and you disagree with me, please feel free to leave a comment. I would really like to see some of the stuff that you've made with it, because I do love films that are filmed on the Blackmagic cameras. You know, when you've got someone who is really talented and they're using like DaVinci Resolve and they've got like loads of different lenses and they're working with one of these, they can create some beautiful films. But the fact of the matter is, this is not for a first-time filmmaker, and it's not for someone who doesn't have already got a large stash of Micro Four Thirds lenses. And I do have a large stash of Micro Four Thirds lenses. You know, I do like Micro Four Thirds, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to this camera, the camera itself is a disappointment. Anyway, you guys have a nice day. Take care. Bye.